Hello, hello, and welcome to the Original Origins podcast, hosted by A Family Tree, a private adoption agency located in Honolulu, Hawaii. My name is Shayla Nichols, and I am a licensed social worker at A Family Tree. I'm also the daughter of a transnational adoptee. Thanks for tuning into our podcast, where I interview members of the adoption community about their stories. The reason this podcast is called Original Origins is because every adoption story is unique. And although, as practitioners, we sometimes generalize adoption experiences, we also recognize that no two stories are the same. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode. On today's episode of Original Origins Meaningful Conversations about Adoption, I'm joined by Crystalline Oropabo. She is the adoptive parent of a 1-year-old daughter. She is a previous A Family Tree client and a good friend of mine now, and she has graciously agreed to come on the podcast and share a little bit about her experience with grief and loss and her family's fertility struggles and what led them to adoption and what her life has been like since taking placement of her daughter over a year ago. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Crystalline or Pablo. Thank you very much for being on my show. I was like, when I start interviewing adoptive parents, you were the first person that I thought of, obviously, because you are so, I think you're so like open and reflective about your experience. And you obviously talked to Stephanie Lum on her podcast, right? Right after you adopted Issa. And um, I I talked briefly about, like, loss from the perspective of the adoptive parents in one of my, previous episodes, but, um, I spoke mostly about loss from the experience of the adoptee. I It's been such a honor being able to witness your guys' journey and experience, like, from complete beginning to end, like, when you first approached us about I know you'd been talking about adoption for many years prior, but, like, first starting the journey and contacting our agency, and I remember when you first started, there was a little bit of, like still a little bit of apprehension, I think, just, like, uncertainty about what to expect in the adoption journey, and then you guys did your home study, and I got to know you guys really well during that process, and then, you took placement of Issa in exactly a year later, which is very quick in terms of in the adoption world, which I think goes to show just, like, how ready you guys were, and the universe knew that, and God knew that, and now obviously getting to watch Issa grow up is a blessing for me, so, do you wanna share a little bit about your adoption story and what brought you to adoption and why you chose the path that you chose?
Well, thank you for considering us and thinking about us. It's been a journey, but I'm personally so blessed to have you as a friend and as a mentor walking with us through from day one, and just giving us the tools and the resources that we need, even the support that we needed, pre and then post adoption. And we love having you as part of our community. We consider you family, and I look forward to Issa getting to know you as she continues to grow up because you're
Mm,
such a family tree and you are such an amazing influence. And just we're so happy that you guys are a part of our community. So, but yeah, I would love to share just a little background. And so my husband and I got married in 2015, and like any new married couple, we had just decided to enjoy our time as newlyweds, and we decided that we would wait a year before trying. and that's what we did. And we quickly found out after that year when we were trying in 2016 that it wasn't as easy as we made it out to be.
Mm,
And in 2017, we decided to seek um, specialists' care and guidance as to how we could continue to try to grow our family. But it was in that process that we found out I was diagnosed with infertility, and it was just due to a couple of things with my reproductive system, and so that in itself was a huge loss.
mm,
I grieved and fell into seasons of depression, very deep depression, in 2017, and it was really a journey from then on of my healing, because ever since I was a little girl, I just desired to be a mom. When people would ask me, like what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would say get married and be a mom.
mm,
And that's all I desired. That's all I really wanted. And so to hear the doctors in that moment when I was doing a specific test to see, like identify what was exactly hindering us from growing our family, it was like when he gave me the news, the lights and the hope in my heart was just snuffed out, and I just in those moments I really felt no purpose of living, and so
mm,
I struggled. I know many of us struggle with different types of depression and different reasons of why we fall into depression, and for me it was because I just felt like my deepest dreams as a woman were ripped away from me, and it also was in a societal way. I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I wasn't able to give my family the dreams that we had wanted to grow our family, and so it was a lot of just it was a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of I had to do a lot of reflecting and healing.
mm,
But from that, it took a couple of years. And in my journey of healing, we just knew that we had a lot of love to give. I love children, and
mm,
I knew that there was still love for me to give, and I didn't want to let that go. The children just bring me so much joy, and so we would babysit whenever we could, which ultimately led us to a family who had asked us to be their adoptive son's Hanai parents.
mm,
And they were um, they were walking through some challenges themselves. He was adopted internationally, and they had just moved from California. But then at that time, her husband had found out that he had pancreatic cancer, and so our desire was to just really be a support for them, and we just embraced their son. He was 6 years old at that time. We just embraced him as our own, and we supported them through their journey. Ultimately, his father had passed, and we just knew that we played a role in his life. They since have moved back to the mainland, but we know that in that moment of when we gave our love so generously and authentically, it fulfilled a purpose. And we're just, our heart's desire and prayer is that it will plant seeds of just love and generosity in his heart. So from that day onwards, we just knew in our heart, like, okay, like it feels good to give. And for us, like our desire, and we knew that our joy was more than just achieving a dream, right? We knew that there was purpose in something more than just living for ourselves. And so my husband and I decided to volunteer at a nonprofit organization. It's called The Shelter, and it was directly connected with our church, who provided the opportunity. The shelter provides homes or temporary housing for homeless mothers and children. So we just started to volunteer our time, and every weekend and some days during the week, we would go and spend time with the mothers, build relationships, spend time with the kids, take them out, play. Sometimes we take them to like Chuck E. Cheese or even just walk with the mom in the mall because many times as a single mom, it's difficult. Like you can't go out in public with three kids and accomplish what you need to accomplish. So maybe it was even a trip to the grocery store, or we would stay with her kids while she went to the store. And it
Mm,
just brought us so much fulfillment to just love on these kids, spend time with these kids, see the joy on their faces. We became I guess professional auntie and uncles to all of those children, and it was such a fulfilling time. From our volunteer experience, it led us to a mother who was walking her own journey as well. She was struggling, and she relapsed. So her desire was that her daughter would stay with us. And as she continued to seek help, far as rehab, she asked that we foster her because her daughter went back into the foster system. And so
mm,
we had the privilege of then fostering and going through that process with the state of becoming her foster parents. And she stayed with us for about 4 months. And then we worked with the state to get her reunited with her biological family. And even though she reunited with her biological family, we built such an awesome relationship with her auntie, who was her guardian, and we just provided her the support. So she would come over our house and sleep over, and we would, I guess, in a sense, provide what is called respite care, I believe,
mm,
just to the auntie, provided
mhm,
her support, whatever she needed. But through that whole experience, it just opened up our eyes to see, and we struggled with a lot of insecurities when it came to foster care or adoption. Just even the thoughts, we would have deep conversations of like, would we be able to love them as our own children? And so while we were having these conversations, my husband and I decided that we would give IVF a shot. And so the whole year of 2020, we went through our IVF journey, and it was actually quite a lengthy journey. Usually, people's IVF process takes maybe like 3 to 6 months. Ours took almost a year.
oh, wow.
Just some of the complications that we ran into and additional procedures we had to do. So I we walked through our IVF journey starting March, February, March of 2020, and December of that year, 2020, we found out that um, we had lost our baby. And
Mm,
so it was in that moment where I felt the greatest pain. Um, and it just, all I can describe it when I reflect back, it's like this black hole that is sucking you in, and you, in those few moments, you have a choice to make. You have a choice on what you will focus on. um and so I allowed myself to grieve, but I knew that I didn't want to go back to that place where I was in 2017, because it was a very dark season. And it was then when I held on so strongly to my faith, and I just was like, I cried out to God, and I was like, God, you have to help me. Like, I cannot go through this again. And so I struggled for, I was mourning, I was grieving for a while. And in February, I decided that I needed to see a counselor, and so I sought professional help just for me to speak to someone and talk through my emotions, and it was the most transforming experience that I ever walked through in 2021. She helped she helped me what she gave me was so significant, and I do believe that it was because of her help, um, as a s as a counselor, helped me heal even beyond our infertility journey. Some of the things that I was still didn't know that I had buried deep down inside, and I do believe that the healing that I walked through in 2021 actually prepared me to become a parent.
Mm.
And so that was the start of it. And as I continued to heal, conversations began to blossom again between Manny and I about, you know, not if adoption was our plan B, but if we had the capacity and we were ready to walk into this new journey. Because adoption was never meant to be a plan B. It was always a choice. It was always our first choice, irregardless of what had happened in our past. We just knew that there's seasons and there's timing for everything. And I believe that when I walked through much of my healing in 2021, I knew that my heart now had the capacity to love a child, how in whatever manner.
Mm. Right,
And
because you guys were your initial plan was to have biological children and then adopt later, right?
we desired to have biological children. We still desire
Mm,
to grow our family.
mhm,
But now it's not so much like focused on what the modality is or like how we are going to grow. It's just we just desire to grow our family in
mm,
whatever way, shape, or form that looks like, because we now have a deeper understanding of what what family really means.
mm. Yeah, something that's so inspiring to me about your family is how reflective you and how much work you put into yourselves, both individually and as a couple, before you even thought about the adoption process because you recognized that there was a loss that needed to be mourned and that you were holding on to a lot of grief and you gave yourself permission to feel those feelings. And I think that um, a lot of times people expect adoption to heal those things for them, which isn't going to be the case. And I think sometimes that actually makes it harder. But you recognize that, first you needed to do the healing journey and then you could move forward with the adoption journey.
Absolutely. I feel like just naturally anybody, when we life itself is just not fair, and we go through things in life, whether we the good, the bad, the ugly, whether we've prepared for it or not. And there were a lot of things in my past, I mean, from childhood to adolescence to growing into adulthood, there were a lot of scars that I needed to address. And I truly believe that if I didn't address it by seeking out counseling, and I didn't even know that I needed it, right? But
Mm,
it's like the more whole I am as a person, the more whole I am as a parent. And I do believe that I am a better parent for our daughter because I walked through part of my healing journey of just being reflective of what are some of the things that contributed to the way that I do things and the way that I see things in my perspective. It's not even so much anymore about the trauma and the pain that we walked through infertility, but it was me as an individual needing and wanting to be whole. And so I'm so grateful that I was presented the opportunity. I originally thought, and I told my counselor that I'm just here because I just walked through a miscarriage. Little did I know I was actually gonna go like decades back and like get healing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
that's always how it goes, right? You're like, I just have this one little problem, and your therapist is like, oh no, you don't.
like, yeah, and I didn't know that. But if I didn't walk through what I walked through in my years of walking through infertility, it wouldn't have led me to that season, and I wouldn't be able to provide what I feel like I am providing for my child now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so great. Um, so you did all this work leading up to the adoption, right? And then you finally got to the adoption process itself. What was
Mhm,
that like for you? Because I think there's everyone always goes, "Oh, okay, so we'll just adopt," and without realizing how arduous and challenging the adoption process itself is. And like, you did a lot of work, grieving and healing before the adoption process, but I'm sure the process itself triggered a lot of that for you. So what was the adoption process like for you, as you were going through like the home study and the matching and, figuring out
mm.
which program, stuff like that?
Well, I'll start off with the initial, and the home study. It's a very daunting process.
Hmm.
Our we always joke around like our hearts are ready, but
Yeah.
the paperwork and the admin that goes into it, like,
Hmm.
it's challenging.
Yeah, and it's
And
very invasive.
it is, and we really had to commit to the administrative process. I think many times, well, at least for us, we committed in our hearts that this was something that we wanted to do, and we had it was an all-in yes for us. But then when you start to see, like, okay, the paper process and then the background checks and the interviews and the home studies that you have to walk, it takes a commitment.
Hmm.
It takes another yes from the individual or the couple to say, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to give up, no matter how long it may take. This was a commitment for my husband and I. And this is where we truly believe we are so grateful for the people in the community that surrounded us. It's so important to have a strong community that will continue to push and encourage you to not give up, because the timeline, like, I think many people, they either get scared, about what people share on like how long the timeline took, or they kind of just go in with, um, one eye open, hoping for the best, and they kind of get worn out, by the whole process. When we first said yes to adoption, we just didn't know where to start. I mean, I think I talked to you about this a few times, but it's like, it's very difficult to find the starting point, right? Because you're just
Hmm.
like, I want to adopt. And then you go on to Google and you're like, how to start adoption. And and then like there's so many different resources, but what you don't realize is even state by state there's different rules.
Yeah.
And you're just like, "Oh my gosh, like, who do I contact and who's the right people for me to connect with?" And
Mhm.
I think we tried doing cold calls at first, but it kinda led to a couple of disappointments or just not what we were expecting.
Mm.
It's just you're also looking for a fit, right?
Right.
You know, a fit with an agency or a fit with a company that would be just as committed and empathetic towards you. Because it's such a delicate situation. I feel emotionally, mentally, and then also like navigating everything. And when we partnered with a family tree, that's where we really felt like you guys broke it down for us. Um, I think for Manny and I, it was really a fun process because we're just that couple that doesn't have anything, or we don't want to hide anything. Like you said, we're an open book and we're okay with, we're not ashamed. I think that's the part too. It's like, yeah, we know where our shortfalls or our shortcomings are. We they're just we're confident in who we are. And so even when it came to like background checks and asking challenging questions and probing questions, we're like, oh well, like this is just part of the process. So
Mm.
it it is tough questions. It is a tough process, but it also comes with, you know, individuals having that sense of security and confidence as well. And believe believe me, I've learned that you need to have that same sense of security and confidence as you become a parent
Mm.
because
It's not for
it
the weak.
that's yeah, it's not for the weak. And so that's how we got it started. You guys walked us through the home study process. We love that you guys gave us resources. We love the classes that we participated in. Even naturally, the feelings of insecurity and just having people say like or validate like I feel that way too was just
Mm,
so reassuring. And then hearing, you talk about interracial adoption. My husband and I are an interracial couple, but it was so important for us to acknowledge our differences and to
mm,
talk about those first before even becoming parents. And so it was just such an awesome resource. The classes were so beneficial. We were sad when they had to end, but we we knew that after the classes, like we were gonna hit the ground running, and things were
mm.
gonna start moving. So, um,
Yeah, I think you guys really like internalized the idea that, the home study, that you're about to take on this huge like personal responsibility, and the home study is kind of a reflection of that. Like you understood the enormous responsibility of like a birth mom choosing you to be the person to raise their child. And so I think that's part of the reason why you guys were so open, is because you're like, birth mom is choosing us to raise her baby. Like that's a responsibility that we don't take lightly and we're willing to commit to. And I think that's part of the reason why you were so open throughout the home study process.
we actually we we actually learned that from you guys.
Mm,
We learned the value of what it meant to our future child of having a relationship with her biological family. Because prior to us sitting through those classes, I had the same feelings as I believe many couples considering adoption walk through. It's like
mm,
deep this deep feeling of insecurity of like, if I allow the biological family in, will my child love me the same?
mm,
And it is a thought or an act of it is an self-preservation.
mm,
And it's very normal, and it's okay for us to feel that, and it's okay for us to admit it. I give myself allowances to admit like I'm scared, because it's only when I admit that and I can call out what I'm feeling internally, then I can talk about it or I can process it. If I just hold it inside and I don't talk it out, it's going to eat me alive. And so that was actually one class, and I believe one of the resources that you guys gave us about the different roles that the birth family plays, that the adoptive family plays, and how it doesn't take away from the other. And when we started to really just sit on that and mull on it and talk about it as a couple, it was still a scary yes to say 100% we're walking into an open adoption. But it was actually a wholehearted yes for our child.
mm,
Because again, what you'll realize when you become a parent is no longer about you.
mm,
It really, you're an adult for a reason. You're the parent for a reason, because you have enough life experience and you have enough resources, and um, you have enough support at your fingertips to provide you the information you need to process your feelings. You're baby. Your child does not have the ability to do that. So you need to assume that role of being the more mature individual and make the more mature decisions. And when we learn the value of the birth family, that's when we that's when it really changed our perspective.
Mm,
Because we were considering, naturally, I think it's like, yeah, absolutely, we want a closed adoption or semi-closed adoption. Or our thought was the least amount of communication from the birth family, the better.
mm,
But when we understood the importance, that's when our perspective changed.
mm. Speaking of the birth mom, what was the matching process like? Because, as a home study writing agency, we kind of finalize the home study and then we send you off and we don't hear. I mean, you send us updates throughout the process here and there, but then we start working with you again after you take placement. But we didn't really get to know what happened during the matching process. What was that like? Did you experience disappointment? Was it exciting?
Yeah, it was a waiting process. And I know that we were privileged in regards to our timeline, because I know that there are many, many couples who are still waiting and have been waiting for a while. And I admire those couples who haven't given up.
Mm,
And I think without even knowing, right, what choosing an agency means, we thought, oh, just put our application out there and to as many places as possible so that it gives us, more chances to, find our match. But what
mm,
I didn't realize was that putting your application out there to different agency was like applying to college. There was
mhm,
an application fee.
mhm,
And when we realized that, my husband and I talked about it and we're like, oh, we don't have the financial resources to just put our application out to like 10 different agencies, because the application fee varied, right? From like $200 to $500. It just depended on, where you were looking. And so we really then started to we both are Christians, and so we really took that time to pause and just pray and be very intentional about where um, where we submitted our application to. And so we both knew in our hearts that we had a connection to Texas, and
mm,
so that's where we approached our consultant and asked her if there were um, any agencies accepting in Texas. And at the time when we had asked her, she said she actually wanted to recommend an agency, but knew they weren't accepting any applicants at that time. But she felt moved to even share with us like how we could go about inquiring, and she gave us specific instructions on who to email and how to inquire. And so I went ahead and I followed up, with what she had guided us to do. And after a couple of weeks, we heard back from the agency and they said, listen, we just matched a few families, and our timing couldn't have been more, I guess, in sync
mm.
with their process. And she said, we just have two openings available, and we would love to welcome you to be a part of our family at that agency.
Oh, wow.
And it was just such a confirmation, because they only accept 35 to 40 out of state family applicants, and there were only two spots left.
Wow.
And so we kind of knew that that was our home for the time being. And so from that process onwards, we would get profiles, birth mom profiles, and uh, um, something that our consultant gave us as far as like just a word of encouragement. She said, be sure that you both are committed, because the moment you commit your yes to the birth mom, um, and she chooses to match with you, it would be very disappointing if you guys withdraw
Mhm.
your name because it's like, yeah, she said just be sure that when you guys receive the profile, you talk about it, you pray about it, whatever you need to do, and then when you commit, it's your 100% yes. And so we really took that to heart. And she said, even if you don't commit, or you commit and you don't get selected by the birth mom, um, just know that you have been presented to be in her life for a reason, whether it's to send her positive thoughts or continue to pray for her. And of course, we can't correspond with them, but just being able to have that small connection in our journey. I would actually write down the names of the birth moms that we were presented, and I would think about them and I would pray for them and pray that they would be matched with the perfect family and that their child would receive all the love. And so we just knew that we were put in their life for a purpose. And so that helped us along the way, just having that perspective, because there were a couple of times where we committed our yes, but then the birth mom chose another family for another reason. Um, and it was disappointing, but we just knew, and we held on to this hope in our heart that everything happens for a reason. And it was because our baby was still out there waiting for us to be matched with him or her. And so through that whole process, we just learned that one, ethical adoption is really allowing the birth mom the opportunity to provide a choice for her child, the best family that she feels would suit them
Mm.
for their future. And so just understanding that process and knowing that the mothers were making these intentional choices for their child, even though it wasn't us, was just something that we learned along the process. And um, yeah, and that kind of led us to our birth mom.
Yeah, so that I am really grateful that you're so willing to share your experience thus far up to, when you took placement. But now I want to pivot and start talking about the best part, which is when you were, finally matched almost a year ago and took placement of your now almost 1 year old daughter. So what has your experience been raising your baby, your child, your daughter?
It's such a joy. Um, it really is. Um, it's not to say that we don't face the same challenges. We're, I truly believe that biological, adoptive, foster parents just face the same challenges. Nothing separates a parent from another parent. You face challenges.
Mm,
But I think for us, every time we look at our daughter, we just know that she's a miracle that we've been praying for over 7 years. And that's kind of just been our anchor on top of the resources that we've received and the the healing that we've received along the journey. But it's just something, even now, like there are days where I just look at her and I just can't believe she's my daughter. Um, we make Because of our unique journey, we really try to take every opportunity to be intentional, um, and reflective on what we're doing and why we're doing it. Actually, this past weekend, we just took some time to reflect because on August 19th, exactly a year ago, was when we were presented our birth mom's profile.
mm,
And then on August 21st, which was yesterday, is when we officially matched with our
mm.
birth mom. And so, like, not like being reflective and not forgetting, being present, but also not forgetting the blessings that led up to this point. Because I think as parents, it's easy to become overwhelmed. There's just so many life changes that happens in such a short amount of time, whether you've been waiting for 7 years, or the adoption process took X amount of years or months, or the baby was growing in your tummy for 9 months. You're just, and I truly believe this, like, there's never the right time to be a parent. You just do it.
Mm.
And you learn along the way. Um, because there are things that I thought I had figured out because I just naturally loved children, but life taught me otherwise. And it's like you really don't know it all until you walk through it. And even at that, every child is so different. Um, our daughter has taught us the biggest lesson, um, that there are still so many things that we're discovering about ourselves, who we are as individuals, our shortcomings and why there are shortcomings, our strengths and why there are strengths, why we're together as a couple, as a married couple, and how we truly need to rely on each other, because it's so easy to get into this mode of like, I'm just gonna do it all. Like, I'm whatever it takes, I'm just gonna do it all. But you can't. And I think that's also the sobering fact, is that you need people. Um, and so even though our greatest joy has come from adding and growing our family, it has also challenged and grown us so much in this last year.
You guys were parents before
Mhm.
you had any children in your lives. I think, like you mentioned, you always loved kids, but I think that, like, I think you were prepared to be a parent long before you actually became a parent. But, there's, like you mentioned, I think there's a lot of ups and downs of parenting, whether you're parenting biological children or adopted children. And something that we don't talk about enough in adoption is post adoption blues. I think we barely mention it during the home study process. The first time you probably heard about it was in the post adoption process with Anne, our post placement
Yes.
specialist. And it's very common, and it has similar features to postpartum depression, but it can
Mhm.
also be combined with like an increased pressure to bond with the child that might not happen instantly, and potential unresolved grief over previous losses and unmet expectations. Was this something that you experienced, or was it something that you were maybe nervous about?
Yes. So first I should mention that we are privileged to have such a strong relationship with Issa's birth mom. But this is actually a huge reflection of her love and willingness, to allow us into her life, and her love for Issa. There's so many things that we've learned from her sacrifice, from her humility, from her generosity, um, where even in this last year, keeping that line of open communication and just building our relationship with her more as an extended part of our family, um, has taught us so much lessons learning from her. And so we're so grateful, because I believe that in our situation, because of her vulnerability as well with us and her authenticity, it's only, I wouldn't say like it's validated us, but she understands that there are two sides to this as well. And so that's that, there's that shared love, but also that shared understanding and that shared empathy for one another because I do believe if our situation with um Issa's birth mom was different, I do believe we would have like other questions, especially some of the challenges that we've walked through in this last year in regards to Issa's health.
Yeah.
But yeah, so her birth mom and having a relationship with her birth mom and going in with that intention of we're going to do everything we can to keep and build on this relationship. Um, really, 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 I believe, help create this now healthier and safe environment for our family. But yes, post adoption blues, similar to postpartum, is so real. Um, it actually started from the day Issa was born. Um, I, if I'm honest, uh, when when we were called to the hospital because mom had just given birth, and I saw mom holding birth mom holding Issa, that immediate thought of like, oh no, like I'm ripping her away from her birth mom.
Mm,
And even that guilt, uh, and those insecurities that come with it. And if we're not careful, it can become very unhealthy because then you'll start to do things in a sense of competition.
mm,
And so I really had to guard my heart and be extra reflective when it came to being honest on how I felt and what I was feeling. Um, and even just like we talked, well, I've learned a lot from you guys about how a baby self regulates.
mm.
And I'm like, okay, Chris, like maybe you have to learn how to self regulate too. But it was, I had to be very intentional. And at that time, I was still seeing my counselor, and I shared with her like some of these feelings that I was feeling. And I, in a sense, I felt a little threatened. And those fears of like, will Issa bond with me if you hear so much about just in the world of motherhood, about breastfeeding and how the baby just bonds with the mom over breastfeeding. And that was the first thing, like, oh shoot, like I don't have the opportunity to breastfeed Issa. Like, does that already eliminate me? Or, like
Mm,
cause like sort of a rift between my bond with Issa. Um I had to be honest with how I felt and address each feeling as it came, and just accept the advice and reassurance from those who I sought counsel from. And just really understand my role as a mom. There are still times now where, even as an 11-month-old, where she's sick or she's cranky or not feeling well, my mind plays tricks on me. Okay, like, are you not able, or does she not feel comfortable with you because she doesn't have that bond? And of course, that's such a silly thought.
mm,
But it's just how your mind, and so you really have to have an outlet. You have to have people to talk to, or else your mind will play tricks on itself.
mm,
Um, the post uh, adoption blues came because you're kind of like teetering this world of like, I'm so grateful, but then I'm so overwhelmed and stressed at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, you're
And,
exhausted.
and I'm exhausted, and I just walked through a huge transition of now becoming a parent. And it's like you almost feel guilty for feeling these feelings of overwhelmedness, or I'm tired. Like, I used to think like, how dare you feel tired? Like, this is something that you've been wanting for 7 years, why would you feel this way? You're so ungrateful.
Mm,
And that's not it.
yeah. And
Um,
it's such a shame that there's such a lack of support and resources for um adoptive parents who might be experiencing post-adoption blues. Like, I remember, I was at a conference and there was, a woman there who was giving us, a or she was giving a presentation, and she was a professional, but she was also an adoptive mom, and she shared that after she took placement, she sought the support from a postpartum depression group, and they turned her away because she hadn't given birth to the
Wow.
child herself. So there was, maybe already some grief over the fact that she didn't give birth to the child, and then they kind of rubbed it in her face and used it as a reason for why she couldn't join the group. So,
I th I think also one of the challenging parts, being and maybe it's not demographically, but just we don't talk about adoption as much as we should as a
mm,
community. Why do I feel like adoption is such a secret? I don't know.
mm,
I don't know why people maybe feel like it's taboo or they're so ashamed to say, like or share their story. Um the thing is like for us personally, there's no one in our immediate inner circle that have adopted, and so we're just by nature of who we are, and us, like we're out there encouraging people, like if you have love to give to a child, like please by all means consider, extending that love with growing your family through foster or adoption. But
mhm,
there have been times where my husband and I felt super lonely.
mm,
Um there have been times where I've compared myself with my immediate family who they also have children, or my extended family, or my friends who have biological children,
mm,
and they almost um I mean, there's so many factors with the bonding, but then also with just the relatability. And so, I think that it needs to be a topic that's more discussed and shared. And what I do not want my daughter to be, and my husband and I, is we don't want her to be ashamed of her story.
mm,
We don't. We are committed to providing her such a rich life, and part of that rich life is being connected with her first family, her biological family. And for us, that's now the value that we see from the training that we received, of how we can just provide this well rounded opportunity for Issa to receive all the love. And if it's anything that we communicate with her, is be like, she is so loved. She is overly loved. She has so many people that love her from Hawaii and Texas, and just all of our friends and family, and her biological family wherever they're at within the states or internationally. Like we want her to know that she has always been loved, that her birth mom um, made the decision out of pure love for
mm,
her. And I do believe that she'll be able to hear that from her birth mom as she continues to grow older and build her relationship with her and her biological siblings, actually. So she has three biological siblings. She has
mm.
a sister, a brother, and a baby on the way.
What's something that you want people who are considering option to know?
Well, my encouragement my encouragement to them would be, one, if you have love to give it freely and give it generously without hesitation.
Mm,
Um, my other encouragement would be, if there are areas of insecurity or questions, talk to somebody. It's okay. You'll actually find that this world is a lot more generous than we think it to be. And there are people who do care as long as you're connected with the right people. And who knows, like that person or that help that you seek out can actually broaden your understanding, your perspective of what life truly is.
Mm,
To not give up. It's the moment you commit to adoption from signing that first form, it's a commitment for a lifetime. It's my husband and I see it like just like how we were trying to have a child naturally, like because that's the thing, right? When you're trying to have a baby, you don't really have a choice or a say on when you'll get pregnant. Well, usually, unless
mm,
you're doing IVF, but still, it's such a miracle.
mhm,
And so even the adoption process, the moment you sign that first form or fill out that first form or sign that paper, first document is your whole heart, wholehearted, committed yes to the process and to your future child. And yeah, don't give up because your greatest miracle is you could be one step away from your greatest miracle. And that's
mm,
what we learned is that because we didn't give up hope, we now get to enjoy um, the greatest blessing in our
mm.
family.
That's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, I think that uh, I think it's really helpful for, like you've mentioned, for adopted parents to know that they're not alone and to have someone else affirm maybe some thoughts that they're having themselves might help mitigate some of that shame that I think adoptive parents feel a lot of the times. So, and then my last question is a question that I ask all of my guests, and that's is there a movie, book, or TV show about adoption that you feel accurately represents your experience as an adoptive parent?
Um, I actually was thinking about this. Of course, like there's the movies that, like Hollywood makes.
Mm,
What is it called? There's one with oh shucks. Instant Family.
yeah.
I think that was like the first movie I watched that was directly related. But I wouldn't know or I wouldn't say that's exactly how it went, but it gave a good picture. But for me, um a book that is really, really, really helping us share with Isa, because we've been talking to her about her adoption story since the day she was born. I think
Mhm,
when we were in the hospital with her, we just started talking to her about her adoption story,
mm,
about her birth mom, about her birth family, about the process. And we were encouraged to do this because we don't want it to be unfamiliar territory or topics to talk to her about as she gets older.
mhm,
And so we just started talking to her about it now. Um, some nights when we're winding down for bed, I'll just start telling her about our adoption story and how we met her birth mom and what that process is like and why she now has a relationship with her birth mom. And so, a book that we will keep very, very close and continue to read to her as she grows up. It's called The Story of My Open Adoption.
mm,
And it's a wonderful illustrated book for children. We read this to her at least 2 or 3 times a week. But it just it's just a beautiful illustrated story to children on open adoption
mm,
and why their birth mom or birth family made that choice and how we can continue to grow that relationship between both families. But
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's so great. I'm so glad to hear that um, you guys have talked to Issa about her adoption since the very beginning. And I'm glad also, too, that the point of this question is actually to kind of show that there is very few resources out there that represent the adoption experience, whether that's the adoptee or the parent or whoever. Um, but there are more and more resources coming out. Especially, I have seen quite a few children's books about adoption, and it's a really great way for parents to like introduce adoption to the kid, and also for the kid to see,
Mhm.
representation of themselves in the things that they read and the shows they watch. And I hope that more and more things um, come to, you know, are produced or created so that we have more options, really.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for being on this show. I'm so grateful again for, and I actually didn't even realize that today is that it's been a year since you guys were matched.
Mhm.
So again, it feels just kind of serendipitous, but I'm so grateful for you, and I'm really excited for our adoptive parents to have the opportunity to listen to this episode and feel like maybe like someone is putting words to things that they
Mm.
didn't realize or couldn't find the words to describe for themselves. So, because I think you're so good at articulating your thoughts and your feelings. So, thank you so much again. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please remember to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Follow our socials at A Family Tree High. And if you have any feedback or know someone that should be featured on our podcast, please head to our website, afamilytree.org, and fill out the form on our podcast page. If you'd like to make a donation to our organization, you can do so on our website as well.